Здравствуйте. Hello and welcome to Russian language class. Before moving on, let's have a quick recap of the topics that we learned in the previous lesson. In the previous lesson, we discussed about the passive participles in the present tense as well as in the past tense. So, let us look at some of the examples where the passive participle present and past participle passive have been used. Какие картины вы смотрели в этом музее? So, which paintings did you look at in this museum? Мы смотрели все картины, показываемые в этом музее. So, we saw all the paintings which are being shown in this museum. So, here as you can see, this participle, the passive participle denotes the present tense. So, that is why we are using present participle passive. If you change this sentence in a complex sentence with the word katori, how will you do that? Мы смотрели все картины, которые показывают в этом музее. So, которые показывают, which means the sentence is in the present tense. So, that is why we are using present participle passive. Показываемые. And how do we form the present participle passive? Present participle passive are generally formed from the first person plural number by adding the adjectival ending ы and и кратке. So, показывать, показываем and показываемые. Now, let us move on to the past participle passive. О какой книге сказал вам преподаватель? So, about which book your teacher told you? Преподаватель сказал нам о книге, написанной этим автором. The teacher told us about the book which was written by this author. So, here the action is in the past tense, that is why we are using past participle passive. So, if we again change the sentence in a complex sentence using который, how will we do that? Преподаватель сказал нам о книге, которую написал этот автор. So, in that case, if we are using который, then we will use которую because it depends on the verb of the subordinate clause. So, которую написал этот автор. So, this was about the passive participle. So, now we will start the topic that we are going to discuss in this lesson. Today we will talk about the short forms of passive participles. So, let me first mention here that while present participles or the active participles, they do not have short forms, they only have full forms, but the passive participles have short forms as well as full forms. So, how do we use them, that we have to discuss. So, here I have written a full form of a passive participle Atkriti, Atkriti magazine, open shop, and magazine Atkrit, the shop is open. So, here as you can see, we have used the short form of the passive participle Atkriti, Atkriti magazine and magazine Atkrit. So, what is the difference between their use, that we will discuss later on. So, let us first find out how are they formed. So, how do we form the short forms of the passive participles? Passive participles have present participle passive and past participle passive. The short forms are formed from present participle passive as well as the past participle passive. From past participle passive, for example, написанный, how do we form the short form? You have to just drop न, I and E kratke. So, basically if there are two N, you have to drop one N and the ending. So, we get napisan. So, napisan is the masculine form. It has feminine, neuter and plural forms too. Napisan, napisana, napisana and napisani. So, here as you can see there are 4 forms depending on the gender and number. For masculine we have napisan, for feminine we have napisana, for neuter we have napisana and for plural we have napisani. Similarly, atkriti, which is again a passive participle past, we have atkrit. What do? We just remove the ending, the adjectival ending that we had added while forming the passive participle. Just remove that ending and you will get the masculine form atkrit. Add a to get its feminine form atkrita, atkrita, add o to get its neuter form and add I to get its plural form. So, if it has the ending te, I and I kratke, you have to remove I and I kratke to get its masculine form, and if it ends with na, I and I kratke, then you have to drop one na, I and I kratke. So, now the thing is, I have already told you that the passive participles or the short forms of passive participles are also derived from the present participle passive. For example, lubimi, lubimi is the present participle passive. So, from present participle passives also short forms are derived. For example, lubim, lubima, lubima and lubimi. So, these are 4 forms, although we must mention it here that the short forms from the present participle passive are very rarely used. Let us discuss some examples. The first example I have written here is Universitetska biblioteka открыта до 8 часов. Universitetska biblioteka открыта до 8 часов. The university library is open till 8 o'clock. After the, we use the genitive case, that is why we have used vasmi from vosim, 8. And biblioteka, which is a feminine gender noun, we have used the feminine form of the short form of participle atkrit, atkrita. The next example is Mista v первом ряду уже заняты. The places or seats in the first row is already taken. Seats in the first row are already taken. Mista v первом ряду уже заняты. Here mista is in the plural form, that is why we are using the plural form of the passive participle past, which is zaняты. So, apart from this rule, we must mention that if the past participle passive ends with yoni, so if it has an ending yoni, then the stress is different from the root word or from the passive participle. For example, here as you can see, napisanni has stress on e. The same way, in all the short forms, the stress is on e only. But if a passive participle past ends with yoni, then the stress changes. That we will discuss later on. We were talking about the formation and stress on the short form of passive participles. So, where do we put stress? In the short form of passive participles, and during the course of discussion I have told you that if the passive participles has the ending yoni, then the stress changes in the short forms of the passive participle. But if the passive participle has the ending other than yoni, the short forms will have the stress on the same syllable as in the passive participle, as in the full form of passive participle. For example, prachitanni, as you can see, E here is stressed, and in all the short forms that we have written here, masculine, feminine, neuter and plural, the stress is on E. So, basically the stress is on the same syllable as the full form of passive participle. But if we talk about the passive participle rishyonni, the stress is on yo, the second syllable. The same stress has been carried forward in the masculine form, but when we come to the feminine, neuter and plural, the stress changes. So, here a is stressed, rishina, rishino, rishinni. As you can see, the stress has changed to the last syllable. So, here the last syllable is stressed, here again the last syllable is stressed, and here also the last syllable is stressed. So, this is about the stress pattern in the short forms of the passive participle. Now, regarding the formation, one more important thing I need to mention, that there are some exceptions like the verb vidich and slishach, in which the short forms of the participles are derived from the infinitive form of the imperfective aspect. For example, vidich is imperfective, slishach is imperfective. So, the short forms are derived from the infinitive forms of the imperfective aspect of the verbs. So, from vidit we form vijan, vidna, vidna and vidni. So, these are the short forms of the participle from the verb vidit, and from slishat, slishin, slishna, slishna and slishni. So, these are the short forms formed from vidit and slishat. So, now let us discuss about the functions of the short forms of passive participle. So, how does it function in a sentence? So, what are the grammatical function of a short form of passive participle? So, for this purpose I have written a sentence with the full form of the passive participle, and then I have written a sentence with the short form. So, let us discuss them one by one. Mui prachitalif si apisma napisannye nashimi druziyami. So, we read all the letters which were written by our friends. So, here we are using the full form of the passive participle, past participle passive. From napisach we form the past participle passive napisanni. So, here as you can see, this napisanniye, it qualifies the noun pisma. So, it is working, it is functioning as an attribute to the noun or like an adjective. So, here the full form of the past participle passive functions as an attribute or it functions as an adjective. Now, let us move on to the next sentence. Se pisma bali napisanni. So, all the letters were written, but here when we use the short form here is not qualifying any noun here, but it is functioning as a predicate. So, this is the difference between the grammatical functions they perform. Full form of passive participles functions as attributes, whereas the short forms they function as predicate. So, this was about the functions of short forms and full forms. So, we were discussing the functions of short form of passive participles, past participle passive. One of the functions of the short forms of past passive participle is also that they denote the result of an action in the present, past and future tense. So, they can denote the result of an action in present tense, in past tense as well as in future tense. So, let us look at the examples. Siedama pastroeni. So, all the houses are made or all the houses are constructed. Siedama bili pastroeni. So, all the houses were constructed. So, here this denotes the action in the present tense, the result of an action in the present tense, and here this is again the resultant of an action in the past tense. And Siedama budut pastroeni. So, all the houses will be constructed. So, here the result of an action is denoted in the future tense. So, this is one of the functions that the short forms of passive participle perform. Now, one more important point here is you can replace the full form of passive participles past or past participles passive with the short forms of the same participle using the word katore. So, how do we do that? Let us look at the example. Ya chitayu pismo prislanna munya atsom. So, here as you can see we have used the full form of the past participle passive prislanne. So, I am reading the letter which was sent to me by my father. So, here we are using the full form. So, now if you have to replace the full form with the short form, how do you do that? Ya chitayu pismo katore bila prislanna munya atsom. So, here as you can see we are using the short form along with the word katore in the proper form or in the appropriate form, and rest of the things remains the same. So, ya chitayu pismo katore bila prislanna. So, which was sent to me by my father. So, prislanna, why prislanna? Because it is related to katore, and katore it denotes or it qualifies or it indicates pismo, that is which is in the neuter gender, that is why katore is also in the neuter gender and prislanna is also in the neuter gender. So, this is how we replace the full form with the short form. So, this was about the short forms of past participle passive, and during the course we have also seen that the short forms can also be formed from the present participle passive, but their occurrence or their frequency is very rare. So, they are not used as frequently in the speech as past participle passive. So, now we will move on to our next topic. The next topic we have is active and passive constructions in Russian. So, there are some constructions which are active, and how do we change them into passive constructions? This is what we are going to learn today. So, the active, within the active constructions we have categorized into 3 categories or 3 different constructions, and then we have changed them into the passive constructions. And how do we do that? That we will be discussing in this part. So, the first construction, active construction, is with the imperfective aspects of verb. So, if you come across an active construction with the imperfective aspect of verb, how do you change the construction into passive? So, for that let us look at the first example. Ученые решают эту проблему. The scientists, they solve this problem. So, here as you can see, rishat is the imperfective aspect of the verb, and the second example we have is обычно эту букву не читают. Usually this letter is not read or not pronounced. In these two sentences we can see that the verbs are in the imperfective aspect of the verbs. So, now if we come across such examples of active construction, how do we change them into passive? So, if there is an imperfective aspect of a verb used in the active construction, you have to change the verb into reflexive verb. And how do we change the verb into reflexive? We add the particle sya at the end. So, rishayut will change into rishatsa. So, rishats, rishatsa. This is the reflexive verb from the verb rishats. Similarly, from the verb chitaj, chitatsa, and now you can use them in the passive construction. And how do we change the active construction into passive? We bring the object first. So, here in the active construction, what is the object? Object is etu problemu. So, we will bring it in the beginning. Eta problema. So, now this will be the subject, or this will function as the subject. Eta problema rishayatsa uchyonimi. Why uchyonimi? Because we have done that uchyonimi is in the instrumental case. The performer of the action is always put in the form of instrumental case. So, that is why we have changed uchyonia into uchyonimi. So, eta problema rishayatsa uchyonimi. This is the passive construction of the same active construction uchyonia rishayat etu problem. So, this problem is being solved by scientists. The next example was Abhichna etu bukvu ni chetayut. Usually this letter is not pronounced. So, how do we change this sentence into passive construction? Abhichna eta bukva, the same way as we have done in the first sentence, will bring the object in the beginning. So, eta bukva ni chitayatsa. Abhichna eta bukva ni chitayatsa. So, here you have to bring the object into beginning and use the verb which is the reflexive of the verb which was used in the active construction. So, from chitaj we have changed chitaj into chitatsa, which is the reflexive verb, and then you have to use accordingly depending on the number of the subject. Here subject is, the function of subject is being performed by the object in the active construction. So, abhichna eta bukva ni chitayatsa. So, this is how we change the active construction into passive when the active construction is with the imperfective aspect of the verb. So, now the second type of active construction is with perfective aspect of a verb. So, in the first part we have seen, we have learned that the active construction with the imperfective verbs, they are convert or change into passive by using the reflexive verb. So, now the situation is different. Now, we are learning how to convert the active construction into passive when the active construction has the perfective aspect of a verb. For example, studyanti pasmatreli etu presentatio. Pasmatrech, as you already know, is the perfective aspect of the verb smatrech, to look or to watch. So, how do we convert or change this active construction into passive? By using the short form of the participle. So, from pasmatrech, what short of form of passive participle we derive? Pasmotrana. So, eta presentatsia bila pasmatrena studyantami. So, here it will not be studyanti, but studyantami. Why studyantami? We have already discussed. Then whenever we denote the performer of an action, then we put the noun into instrumental case. So, eta presentatsia bila pasmotrana studyantami. The third active construction is with the word katori. So, the third type of active construction with the word katori, how do we change this active construction into passive? By using the full form of the passive participle. Let us look at the example. Mi chitali knigu katorvu vi nam kupili. So, we read the book which you bought for us. So, here mi chitali knigu katoruju we naam kupili. So, here we are using the word katori and the verb which is the Savarshini or the perfective aspect of the verb. So, now we have to change this construction into passive. How do we do that? I have already told you that we will use the full form of the passive participle. So, from kupich, what passive participle do we form? Kuplinni. So, we will use kuplinni in the passive construction. So, how do we do that? Mi chitali knigu kuplinnuyu naam vami. So, we read the book which was bought by you for us. So, here why we are using kuplinnuyu? Because kuplinnuyu qualifies the noun knigu, which is in the accusative case and the gender is feminine. That is why we have kept the form of kuplinni as kuplinnuyu. The accusative case, feminine gender and singular number. So, these are the rules to change the active constructions into passive. Let me repeat them once again. The first active construction is with the imperfective aspect of a verb. How do we change the active constructions with the imperfective aspect of the verb? We will change the verb into reflexive by adding the particle sya, and then we will bring the object into the beginning and then use the reflexive verb, and this is how we change the active into passive. The second type of active construction was with the perfective aspect of a verb. So, how do we change the active construction with the perfective aspect of a verb? We use the short form of passive participle. And the third one with the word katori. So, if the active construction has the word katori, then we use the full form of the passive participle to change the active into passive. Since we have already discussed the rules of changing active constructions into passive, let us try to practice the rules by using short forms of passive participles and converting the active construction into passive. The first sentence that I have written here is in the active voice or active construction. Roman Yevgeny Onegin napisal A.S. Pushkin. The novel Yevgeny Onegin was written by, the author's name is A.S. Pushkin, or if you change the word order, A.S. Pushkin napisal Roman Yevgeny Onegin. A.S. Pushkin wrote the novel Yevgeny Onegin. So, this is the active construction. So, how can we use the short form of past participle passive and change the same sentence into passive? Let us do that. Roman Yevgeny Onegin был написан A.S. Pushkinim. So, here as you can see, we are using the short form of the past participle passive napisanni. So, from napisanni we form napisan, which is the short form, and we are using it to change the active construction into passive. So, Roman Yevgeny Onegin был написан A.S. Pushkinim, and Pushkin you have to change the form of the noun into instrumental case, because it is the performer of the action. Next example is Sculpturu David sozdal italijanski sculptor. Sculpturu David, the sculpture which is called David, was built or made by Italian sculptor. So, now again this is the active construction. You just change the word order and it will be clear to you. Italijanski sculptor sozdal sculpturu David. So, this is the subject, object and verb. So, now how do you change this active construction into passive using the short form of the passive participle derived from this verb? Sculptura David bil sozdan italianskim sculptaram. Sculptura David bil sozdan italianskim sculptaram. So, the sculptura David bil sozdan. Here we are using the short form of passive participle past of the verb sazdat. And what passive participle do we derive from this verb? Sozdanni. And from sozdanni we form the short form sozdan. So, bil sozdan italianskim sculptaram. The next is Stienif gastinai pakrasilif galuboi tsvich. So, here this is an impersonal sentence. There is no subject mentioned here. So, that is why the verb is in the third person plural number. Stienif gastinai, the walls in the guest room was painted in sky blue color. So, how will you change again this active construction into passive? By using the short form of past participle passive formed from the verb pakarasit. So, what past participle passive do we form from this verb? Pakarashinni. And from pakarashinni the short form is pakarashin, pakarashina, pakarashina and pakarashini. Stienif gastinai buli pakarashinni galuboi tsvit. So, here again we are using the short form of the past participle passive. The next sentence, next example we have is Etat sluchi dabno zabili. Again this is an impersonal sentence. This incident was forgotten long back. So, how will you, again this is an active construction. So, how will you change the active construction into passive? By using the past participle passive derived from this verb zabit. Etat sluchi dabno bil zabit. Zabit is the past short form of the past participle passive, which has been formed from the verb zabit, to forget. And the last example we have is Ya zapisal tvoi telephone v knижku. I noted down your phone number in the book or a small book. Tvoi telephone bil zapisan mnoi v knижku. Here mnoi comes from the subject ya. So, here subject has been put in the form of instrumental case because it is the performer of the action, and tvoi telephone has come in the beginning. Tvoi telephone bil zapisan. So, zapisan is derived from the verb zapisat and it is the short form of zapisanni, which is the full form of the past participle passive. So, this is about use of short forms of past participle passive while changing the direct constructions, active constructions into passive. So, this is all we have, and by the conclusion of this topic I conclude the lesson here, and this is the end of our course. I hope you enjoyed this course. Please keep revising the lessons, please do your assignments and do the exercises given in the lessons. So, thank you. Spasiba. До свидания.